It was a crisp, cool day in May, the kind of spring morning that feels like a promise, fresh and full of possibility. The wind still carried the chill of winter, but the earth, the trees and the fields were already speaking the language of spring. Everywhere, flowers bloomed in brilliant bursts of colour, their petals catching the light and sending out their sweet fragrance into the air. The world was waking up, as if spring itself had begun to tell its story. And what a story it was. One of renewal, of beauty returning after a long, cold slumber. In the heart of the garden, a small apple tree stood proudly, its branches heavy with buds. The tree was adorned with delicate, soft green shoots, each one more vibrant than the last. The flower buds, pale pink and nearly ready to burst open, clung to the branches, promising a bloom that would rival the beauty of the season itself. The apple tree, with its graceful form and budding promise, knew it was beautiful. It could feel it deep in its roots, a kind of knowledge passed down through its very leaves, as if it were written in its blood. And when a noble woman, riding in a fine carriage, stopped before the tree and admired its slender, delicate branch, calling it the most beautiful thing in the world, the apple tree wasn't surprised. No, it had always known its beauty. It was inherent, natural, undeniable. With an elegant gesture, the lady reached out and broke off the branch. She cradled it in her hands, the softness of the young leaves brushing against her fingertips. It was a beautiful moment, one full of grace and elegance, and as she placed the branch carefully in her lap, she shielded it with a silk parasol to protect it from the sun. She returned to her grand estate, where marble halls and opulent rooms awaited her. The house was a palace of refinement, with large windows adorned with flowing white curtains, and flowers arranged in crystal vases, their colours alive in the soft light. One vase in particular looked like it had been sculpted from fresh snow, its surface so smooth and pure. The apple branch was placed in the vase among fresh beech twigs, surrounded by the delicate beauty of nature, and placed in a place of honour. Every time someone looked at it, their hearts lifted in appreciation. The branch, which had once been part of the earth, now held a place among the finest things in life, elevated and admired, and in its new position, it grew proud. The apple branch became aware of its beauty, just as any living thing might, when it is celebrated, adored, and praised. But this pride, it seems, was not so different from the pride that any of us might feel when we are admired. For the apple branch, like many of us, had been elevated to a place of prominence, surrounded by beauty, but in doing so, it also became separated from its true nature. It was no longer part of the humble garden from which it had sprung. It had been plucked, separated from the earth, and placed in an environment where it could no longer grow or live as it once had. As days turned into weeks, the apple branch stood tall in the beautiful room of the estate, surrounded by luxury and grandeur. It was admired by all who entered, its delicate blossoms framed by the finest crystal, its elegant form a stark contrast to the rustic simplicity from which it had come. People marveled at its beauty, offering their compliments with each passing glance. The branch had become an ornament, a symbol of refinement and taste, placed carefully in a vase with a few sprigs of beech branches to enhance its appearance. It had never before known such adoration, never before been held in such high regard. And yet, as the days went by, the apple branch began to feel something deep within it, a sense of pride that grew with each passing compliment, with every admiring glance. But this pride, as natural as it seemed, began to twist into something else. It was not just a pride in its beauty, but a growing sense of superiority, as though the branch had come to believe that it was better than the flowers outside, the simple flowers that grew in the fields, the ones that didn't have a place of honor, the ones that people passed by without a second thought. The branch, once part of the earth, now felt itself above the earth, removed from the common plants that grew and lived without recognition. It looked down at them, though it had never before noticed their quiet beauty. In the quiet of the room, where sunlight streamed through the windows and shadows played on the floor, the apple branch began to think about the flowers it had left behind. It thought of the wildflowers in the fields, the ones that bloomed so brightly in the spring and faded just as quickly, the ones that were often overlooked, trampled upon, and forgotten. The apple branch felt a pang of disdain for them, as if their lives, so humble and unadorned, was somehow less than its own. They don't even have names, the apple branch thought, its pride swelling. People just step on them, crush them underfoot without a second thought. They grow wild, unkempt, and uncared for, and yet I am here, in this beautiful room, admired and cherished by all. I was chosen for my beauty, my delicate form. What are they, if not just common weeds? And so the apple branch, once humble and grateful for the life it had, began to harbor a quiet resentment for the plants that remained outside, in the fields and gardens, where they had no one to admire them, no one to praise their beauty. It did not consider the simple joys they brought to the world, the way the wildflowers brightened the fields, how they added color and life to the otherwise dull landscape, or how they served as a refuge for bees and birds, providing food and shelter in their quiet, unassuming way. The apple branch could not see these things. It was too caught up in its own sense of superiority, too wrapped in the admiration it had received to notice the deeper beauty of the world around it. And so it continued to stand tall in the vase, thinking itself above the simple flowers outside, unaware that it too had once been part of their world, had once been one of them, humble and unseen. But the sun, always patient, always constant, shone on both the apple branch and the wildflowers with the same gentle light. It kissed the petals of the apple blossoms and the yellow heads of the dandelions alike, with no judgment, no distinction between them. The sun did not see beauty in terms of worth or praise. It simply saw life, and it embraced it all with equal love. As the days went by, the apple branch stood in the vase, basking in its newfound importance. It had been carefully placed in the finest room of the house, where it could be admired by guests and visitors. Each time someone came in, they paused to marvel at its delicate blossoms, commenting on how beautiful it was, how graceful it looked in its crystal vase. It was the centerpiece of the room, surrounded by luxury, as though it were the epitome of beauty, the perfect example of what nature could create. And in its own way, the apple branch believed it had achieved something extraordinary. It had become the object of admiration, the symbol of spring's beauty, the one thing that stood out among the other plants and flowers. But despite all this attention, something was changing inside the apple branch. It began to think that it was better than the others, the simple flowers in the garden, or the ones that grew in the wild. It looked out the window toward the garden and the fields beyond, and saw the dandelions growing there, their bright yellow heads swaying gently in the breeze. It saw them in the dirt, among the grass, and it couldn't help but feel a sense of disdain for them. They were common, unkempt, untamed. They weren't like the elegant, delicate apple branch, carefully nurtured and admired by people. The apple branch couldn't understand how these small, humble flowers could be happy in their place. How could they find fulfillment in growing in the dirt, with no one to admire them, no one to take them inside, no one to treat them as special? It began to resent them, seeing them as inferior, as less worthy of attention. It thought of the dandelions as weeds, ugly, ordinary things that only cluttered the earth, spreading everywhere, wilting in the dirt, never once getting the recognition they deserved. And yet, despite the apple branch's growing pride, it could not ignore the gentle warmth of the sun that bathed the entire garden, from the grand apple tree in the yard to the small, unassuming wildflowers scattered among the grass. The sun kissed the petals of the dandelions, just as it kissed the delicate apple blossoms, shining on them all with the same quiet, unconditional light. It was a warmth that neither sought nor expected anything in return. The sun offered its light to all, regardless of their status, their beauty, or their place in the world. One day, as the sun reached its peak in the sky, a group of children passed by the garden. The young ones, their faces full of joy, were running through the fields, chasing each other, laughing as they picked flowers from the ground. The preacher, who had been walking nearby, saw them and smiled as he watched the children play. The air was filled with the sound of their laughter, and in that moment, the apple branch felt something stir inside of it. For the first time, it noticed the dandelions in the field. It saw how the children had paused to pick the yellow flowers, how they were making crowns and chains out of them, adorning themselves with the simple flowers in their hair. The apple branch, once proud and aloof, now felt a strange sense of humility. It had always seen itself as something rare, something special, but here were these children, laughing and and playing with the flowers it had once looked down upon. They were the ones who truly saw the beauty in these simple, humble flowers, weaving them into garlands, sharing them with one another, and bringing joy to their hearts. It was in that moment that the apple branch began to understand something important. True beauty was not about being admired or being placed in a vase to be looked at. True beauty was in how something could bring joy to others, how it could touch hearts without needing to be recognized. The apple branch had thought that its beauty was what made it special, but it now realized that beauty, in its truest form, was about connection, about love, about bringing happiness to others, no matter how small or insignificant one might seem. It was in the simplicity of the dandelions that the apple branch finally understood what it meant to be truly beautiful, to be a part of something larger, something that was shared and cherished by all. The sun continued to shine, and the apple branch stood there, a little less proud, a little more humble. It no longer looked down on the dandelions or any of the other flowers in the field. Instead, it saw them for what they truly were, living, breathing things, each with its own unique beauty, each contributing to the world in its own way. Days turned into weeks, and the apple branch continued to stand in the vase, surrounded by luxury and admiration. Yet, as time passed, something shifted in its quiet presence. Though it was still placed in the best room, admired by every visitor who came through, there was a growing sense of discomfort that crept into the apple branch's being. The more it was admired, the more it began to feel a strange isolation from the world outside. It had once been a humble part of the orchard, a simple apple tree amongst many, but now it felt detached from the earth, from the life that had nurtured it, from the very soil that had given it life. The more the apple branch thought about it, the more it realized the truth of its position. It had been plucked from its roots, taken away from the warmth of the soil, and placed in a vase, admired and adored by humans, but separated from the very source of its existence. It had been elevated to a place of honor, and yet it felt a subtle sadness, an absence, a longing for something it could not reach. The sun, though it kissed the apple branch with its golden light every day, could never truly touch the heart of the branch. The branch longed to feel the earth beneath it again, to feel the soil on its roots, to sway with the wind in a field of wildflowers. It longed to return to the garden, to the place where it had grown freely, without the weight of expectation, without the burden of admiration. It had once been part of the cycle of nature, part of the grand tapestry of life that wove through the seasons, but now it felt like an outsider, a relic of a forgotten time, a piece of nature taken out of context. And yet, despite this longing, the apple branch remained in the vase, admired by all who came to see it. Visitors would stop and stare, their faces filled with wonder at its delicate form, its graceful lines, its soft pink blossoms. "How beautiful it is," they would say. "It's the most exquisite thing I've ever seen." The apple branch would stand there, its flowers still and perfect, its leaves unchanging, but inside it felt a growing discomfort. What was it really to be admired without ever truly being seen? To be loved for its beauty, but never for what it was at its core? In the stillness of its position, the apple branch began to reflect on its place in the world. It had been so focused on its own beauty, on the praise it received, that it had forgotten the deeper connection it once had with the earth, with the other flowers in the garden, with the sun that had shone down on it for years. The beauty it had once known was not just in the admiration of others, it was in the quiet moments of growth, of being part of something larger than itself. Beauty, it now understood, was not a prize to be won, but a gift to be shared. It was not something to be kept in a vase, separated from the world, but something that had to be lived, experienced, and shared with others. One afternoon, the young noblewoman who had first admired the apple branch returned to the house. She entered the room where the branch stood, now slightly wilted from days of being in the vase. She gazed at it for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "It's still beautiful," she said softly, her voice filled with admiration. "But it's not the same as it was when I first picked it." The apple branch, in its quiet reflection, realized that it was true. Its beauty had not faded, but it had lost something. It had lost its connection to the earth, to the very life that had nourished it. And in this it found a kind of peace, a kind of release. It no longer needed to be admired for its beauty. It needed to return to where it had come from, to the place where it could once again grow, where it could once again be part of the life that surrounded it. Beauty, after all, was not something to be displayed and admired from afar. It was something that grew, something that lived. As the sun set that evening, casting a soft glow over the room, the apple branch felt a gentle sense of understanding wash over it. The world outside, the flowers in the garden, the wild flowers in the field, the dandelions that grew along the edges of the road, these were all part of the same cycle. They were all part of the same story. And in the end, it wasn't about being the most beautiful, the most admired, the most praised. It was about being alive, about growing, about being part of something larger, something eternal. And so, with a quiet sense of peace, the apple branch began to let go of its need for admiration, its need for recognition. It understood now that it had always been part of something beautiful. Even in its humble beginnings, it no longer needed to be a symbol of perfection. It just needed to be. As the days stretched into weeks, the apple branch began to wither, its once fresh blossoms drooping and its leaves curling at the edges. The noblewoman who had once admired it so tenderly continued to place it in the best room of her house, but even she began to notice the change. The branch, though still beautiful in its own way, no longer held the same vibrancy it once had. It had been taken from its roots, and though it had been loved and cared for, something essential was missing. It could no longer feel the earth beneath it, no longer sense the wind through its branches, no longer stretch toward the sun with the same joy it once had. The apple branch began to think about what it had lost, the connection to its roots, the source of its life. It had been admired for its beauty, placed in the finest vase, but in doing so, it had been separated from the very thing that had given it life. It had once been part of a greater whole, part of the orchard, part of the earth, but now it was just a single branch, a single piece of nature severed from its source, and in its isolation, it began to feel a deep, quiet longing for something more, for the life it had once known, for the world it had once been a part of. It was in the stillness of this reflection that the apple branch began to understand something crucial. Beauty, while a gift, was not the end of the story. The beauty it had once possessed, the admiration it had received, was not what had made it special. It was the connection to the earth, to the life that had nourished it, that had made it beautiful in the first place. The love and care it had received had been wonderful, but it had not been enough to fill the emptiness left by its separation from its roots. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the open windows of the grand house, the noblewoman returned. She had been busy with social events, but now, seeing the wilting apple branch before her, she paused. Her face softened, a look of concern crossing her features. She approached the vase, her fingers gently brushing the leaves of the branch, and for the first time, she truly saw it. Not as an ornament, not as something to be admired, but as a living thing that had once been full of life, full of potential. In that moment, the noblewoman understood. The apple branch, in all its beauty, had been a part of something much larger than itself, a part of nature, a part of the world. It had been admired for its form, for its beauty, but it had never been truly loved for what it was. It had been taken from the earth, from its place in the garden, and placed in a vase to be looked at, but it had lost its connection to the very thing that had made it unique. It had been separated from its roots, from the soil that had nourished it, and without that connection, it had begun to fade. The noblewoman took a deep breath, her heart heavy with the realization. She gently lifted the apple branch from the vase and placed it back into the garden, where it could once again be part of the earth, where it could feel the soil beneath it and the sun above it. She knew that it would never fully return to its former glory, that the beauty it had once possessed had faded with its time in the vase. But she also knew that by returning it to the garden, she was giving it something far more valuable than admiration. She was giving it the chance to live, to be a part of something greater, to return to the cycle of life that had once nourished. The apple branch, though still fragile and withered, seemed to sense the change. It felt the cool earth beneath it, the gentle breeze on its leaves, and in that moment, it understood. Beauty was not something that could be admired from a distance, something that could be placed on a pedestal and left alone. Beauty was something that lived, something that was part of the world, something that had to be connected to the earth, to the life around it. It was in the quiet moments, in the humble acts of living, that true beauty existed. The noble woman stepped back, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. She had learned something important, that beauty in all its forms was fleeting, but the love that connected all things, the love that nourished and sustained, was eternal. And as she walked away, she felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had returned the apple branch to the place where it truly belonged. The days turned into weeks, and the apple branch, now rooted once again in the soil, began to find itself in the rhythm of the garden. It was no longer the prized possession it had been in the noble woman's home, the center of attention, the subject of admiration. Instead, it was once again just a part of the greater landscape, surrounded by other plants, other trees, and the ever-changing cycle of nature. But this shift, rather than diminishing its beauty, allowed the branch to rediscover the essence of what it truly meant to be alive. It was no longer something to be admired from a distance, but something to be lived with, something to be experienced in its quiet moments of growth and change. As the weeks passed, the apple branch began to show signs of life once again. Its leaves, which had once wilted and faded in the vase, began to regain their vibrant green color. New shoots sprouted from the tips of its branches, and tiny buds, once again full of promise, began to appear. The earth, which had been its foundation all along, nourished it in ways that admiration and praise never could. It began to thrive, not because it was placed in a vase for others to admire, but because it was rooted in the soil, connected to the very heart of the earth. One warm afternoon, as the apple branch swayed gently in the breeze, a small child passed by, his eyes wide with wonder. He stopped to admire the branch, his gaze fixated on the delicate flowers that had bloomed in vibrant clusters, their soft petals catching the sunlight. He knelt down, gently touching the leaves, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the branch. His innocent touch was filled with curiosity, as if he were discovering something sacred, something pure, something that had always been there, waiting for him to see it. The apple branch felt the child's touch, and for the first time since it had been placed in the vase, it understood the difference between being admired from a distance and being truly appreciated. The child didn't see it as an object of beauty to be placed on a pedestal. He saw it as something alive, something real, something that existed within the world, as a part of the natural cycle. The branch felt a sense of joy, not because it was being admired, but because it was being seen, truly seen, for what it was, a living, breathing part of the world. The child stood up, his eyes filled with wonder. "It's beautiful," he said softly, his voice full of innocence and awe. "It's like it's part of everything." The apple branch felt a warmth spread through it at the child's words. Yes, it thought, it was part of everything. It was part of the earth, part of the sky, part of the sun and the rain, part of the cycle of life that was always unfolding. Its beauty wasn't something that needed to be admired or praised by others. Its beauty came from its existence, from the way it connected with the world around it, from the way it brought life and joy to those who truly saw it. As the child wandered off, the apple branch stood there, swaying gently in the breeze, feeling a deep sense of peace. It had learned something profound, something that would stay with it forever. Beauty was not about being placed in a vase or being admired from a distance. It was about being alive, being part of the world, and embracing the life that flowed through it. It was about growing, changing, and sharing that growth with the world. It was about being seen, not as an object of admiration, but as a living, breathing part of the earth, a part of the greater whole. And so the apple branch continued to grow, to bloom, and to live, no longer burdened by the need for admiration or praise. It was simply a part of the world, and in that simplicity, it found its true beauty. As the apple branch stood quietly in the garden, its form gracefully swaying in the breeze, it found a sense of peace it had never known before. The once proud feeling of being admired and praised by others had faded, replaced by something deeper, something more rooted in the natural world. It was no longer something to be looked at from afar, something to be placed in a vase and admired for its beauty. It had become part of the larger rhythm of life, a living thing growing alongside other plants, trees, and flowers, all of them contributing in their own way to the harmony of the garden. The apple branch had stopped comparing itself to the other plants in the garden. It had stopped looking for validation, for approval, for recognition. It had come to understand that true beauty was not about standing out or being admired. It was about being fully present in the moment, fully engaged in the process of living. And so it stood there, quietly growing, its leaves rustling gently in the wind, its flowers blooming with the simple grace of a plant that had found its place in the world. One afternoon, as the sun began to set and the shadows stretched long across the garden, a young girl came into the yard. She was no more than 6 or 7, with wide eyes filled with curiosity and wonder. She wandered through the garden, her bare feet soft against the cool earth, her arms reaching out to touch the flowers and plants she passed. The apple branch watched her as she approached, its leaves fluttering gently in the breeze. The girl paused before the tree, gazing up at its delicate blossoms, her eyes bright with admiration. Without hesitation, the little girl reached out and gently touched one of the branches, her fingers brushing against the soft petals. She smiled, her face lighting up with a pure, unguarded joy. "It's so pretty," she whispered to herself, her voice soft and full of wonder. She stood there for a moment, lost in the beauty of the tree, her tiny fingers still resting on the branch, as if she were offering her love to it in return for its beauty. The apple branch, in that quiet moment, felt something stir within it, a warmth, a quiet sense of fulfillment. It had not been placed in this garden for the purpose of being admired, nor had it been given its beauty to be appreciated by others. But here, in this simple, unspoken connection with the little girl, the apple branch understood something profound. Beauty, true beauty, was not something to be measured by external validation. It was not about being the most admired, the most beautiful, or the most extraordinary. It was about the quiet moments, the subtle connections, the shared experiences of life that held the most meaning. The little girl stood there for a moment longer, her fingers gently brushing against the apple branch. She did not need to say anything, did not need to ask for anything. She was simply there, in the presence of the apple branch, sharing in its quiet existence. And in that moment, the apple branch realized that it had always been part of something far greater than itself. Something larger, more eternal. Something that could not be captured by the praise of others, but could only be experienced in the simple act of being. As the girl finally turned and skipped away, her laughter carrying on the wind, the apple branch stood still, its flowers swaying gently in the evening air. It had come to understand that love and beauty were not about recognition or admiration. They were about connection, about presence, about living fully in the world and embracing the simple moments of grace that unfolded with each passing day. The apple branch, once proud and self-conscious, had now found a new way of being. It was no longer defined by how others saw it, but by how it lived, by how it contributed to the world around it. In its quiet existence, it had found peace, and in that peace, it had found something even more beautiful than the admiration it had once craved, the simple joy of being part of something greater, something that could never be measured but was always there. The days continued to pass, each one bringing new lessons, new realizations for the apple branch. No longer fixated on the need for recognition or admiration, it had grown into something more profound, something rooted in its connection to the earth, to the sky, to the sun. It was no longer just a beautiful object placed in a vase to be admired. It was a living being, a part of the natural world, no different from the dandelions in the field or the wildflowers that bloomed in the most unexpected places. Its beauty was not the kind that could be captured by words or praise. It was the quiet beauty of existence itself, the beauty that came from being fully alive, fully present, and fully connected to the world around. And yet, the apple branch could not help but feel a certain wistfulness at times. It looked at the other flowers in the garden, the ones that bloomed without fanfare, the ones that grew wild and free, and it wondered about the lives they lived. They were so different from it, so unadorned, so humble in their beauty. and yet in their simplicity they held something profound, a beauty that came not from being noticed, but from simply being. One day, as the apple branch stood in the garden, a sudden breeze swept through the trees, sending a flurry of leaves into the air. The flowers swayed gently, their petals dancing in the wind, and the apple branch watched as the dandelions in the field, those same humble flowers it had once looked down upon, swayed along with the others. And then, something remarkable happened. A small child, no more than 3 or 4, came running through the garden, his hands outstretched as he played. The breeze caught his laughter, carrying it through the air like music. He was smiling, his face alight with the joy of being alive, and in his hand he held a small bouquet of dandelions. The child ran past the apple branch, his bare feet soft against the grass. He didn't stop to admire the apple branch, he didn't even notice it. Instead, he ran with the dandelions, laughing and skipping, lost in the pure joy of the moment. The apple branch for a moment felt a pang of longing. It remembered the days when it had been admired, when it had been the center of attention, when it had been seen and appreciated for its beauty. But now it realized there was something far more beautiful than that. The simple joy of being, of living, of sharing a moment of happiness with others. The apple branch watched the child as he disappeared into the garden, his laughter fading into the distance, and in that moment the apple branch understood. It wasn't the admiration or the recognition that mattered, it was the life itself, the moments of joy, of love, of connection that were the true beauty. It had spent so much time seeking recognition, but in doing so, it had missed the deeper truth. Beauty was not something to be seen or admired. It was something to be lived, something to be experienced, something that existed in the smallest, most fleeting moments. The apple branch, once proud and eager for admiration, now stood quietly, its leaves swaying gently in the breeze. It had let go of the need to be seen, to be praised, to be special. It had learned that its true beauty was not in how others saw it, but in how it existed in the world, in the life it shared with the other plants, the other trees, the other creatures that called the garden home. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the garden, the apple branch felt a deep sense of peace wash over it. It had found its place, its purpose. It was not a symbol of beauty to be admired from afar, but a living part of the world, contributing to the larger story of life. The garden was full of beauty, not because of the apple branch or any one flower, but because of everything together. Each plant, each leaf, each petal contributing to the whole. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, the apple branch stood in silence, feeling the earth beneath it, feeling the warmth of the sun that had kissed its blossoms, feeling the gentle breeze that swayed its leaves. It was part of something much larger than itself, something eternal, something full of grace. It was no longer just a branch in a vase, it was a part of the living world, and that was enough. The apple branch had found a new peace, rooted deeply in the soil, connected to the very essence of life. It had stopped yearning for admiration, stopped looking for praise. The winds of change had swept through it, and in that gust it had shed its pride, embracing a more profound understanding of its existence. It had learned that beauty was not in the eye of the beholder, nor in the grand gestures of admiration. Beauty was not something to be displayed, not something to be revered from afar. It was found in the act of living, in the quiet moments of connection, in the shared breath of life between the trees and the sky, between the plants and the earth. The apple branch began to see the world differently. The once distant dandelions, which it had so arrogantly dismissed, now stood in its eyes as equals. Each flower, each plant, each tree had its role to play in the grand mosaic of the garden. The dandelions, with their simple yellow heads, may have been overlooked by others, but they had a beauty all their own. They were not meant to be placed in vases or admired from a distance. They were meant to grow freely, to spread their seeds, to bring life to the world in their own quiet way. The apple branch understood now. True beauty was not confined to the gaze of those who admired, but existed in the way each life touched the world, each life contributing to the greater whole. The world outside the garden was not just a collection of things to be admired. It was a living, breathing system, a network of life and love and growth. Each plant, each flower, each blade of grass was part of something bigger than itself, and it was in this interconnectedness that true beauty was found. The apple branch no longer saw itself as separate, as special. It saw itself as a piece of the greater puzzle, a piece that, while small and unremarkable, played its part in creating the harmony of life. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden, the apple branch felt a gentle rustling in the air. It was the same breeze that had once carried the fragrance of the wildflowers, the same breeze that had once whispered through the leaves, but now it seemed to carry something else, something deeper. It carried the knowledge that the branch was part of something much larger than itself, that it had always been part of this larger story. As the breeze rustled through the leaves, the apple branch could hear the distant sounds of children laughing. The children from the village had returned, running and playing through the fields, their voices full of life and joy. The apple branch watched them as they ran, their laughter filling the air like music. They paused to pick wildflowers, to weave crowns and necklaces, and in those fleeting moments, the apple branch understood something crucial. The flowers, the dandelions, the simple plants, they were part of the beauty of the world, not because they were rare or admired, but because they were alive, because they brought joy and color and life to the world. The apple branch felt its heart swell with gratitude. It had once thought that beauty came from being admired, from being seen by others, but now it understood that beauty came from being alive, from being part of the world, from giving and sharing. It was in the wildflowers that grew freely, in the children who played in the fields, in the gentle breeze that touched its leaves. And as the evening settled into night and the children wandered off to their homes, the apple branch felt at peace. It no longer sought admiration or recognition. It was content to simply be, to exist in the quiet, beautiful harmony of the world around it. The sun had set and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, casting their soft glow on the earth below. The apple branch stood tall, its leaves rustling gently in the night air, and for the first time it understood that it had always been part of something much larger than itself, something eternal, something full of grace. The apple branch, now rooted deeply in the earth, continued to grow with a quiet elegance. The once bright blossoms had faded, but their legacy remained in the soft green leaves that now swayed gently in the breeze. The seasons turned, and the apple branch, though no longer the center of attention, continued to contribute to the garden in its own way. It no longer sought praise or recognition, no longer needed to be the most beautiful or the most admired. It had found something more valuable, a deep sense of contentment in its simple existence. As time passed, the apple branch began to notice the small moments of beauty that surrounded it every day. It saw how the sunlight dappled the ground through the branches of the trees, how the wind carried the scent of wildflowers through the air, how the birds perched on the branches, their songs filling the garden with music. It saw how the garden was full of life, full of quiet moments of joy and grace, and in these moments, the apple branch found its own peace. But still, it could not help but think back to the days when it had been admired, when it had been the center of attention. It had been a beautiful thing, admired by many, celebrated for its form and elegance. Now it was just another part of the garden, another plant among many, its beauty overlooked by those who passed by. And yet, the apple branch had come to understand that this was not a tragedy. It was simply the way of life, the ebb and flow of seasons, of growth and decay, of being and becoming. One afternoon, a small group of people passed through the garden, their voices drifting on the breeze. They were visitors from the village, and they were walking through the fields to admire the flowers. The apple branch saw them coming, and for a brief moment, it felt the familiar flutter of anticipation. Would they notice it? Would they admire its beauty once again? Would they stop and praise it, just as they had before? But as they drew closer, the apple branch saw that they were not paying attention to it. They walked right past, their eyes focused on the other flowers, the other plants. They admired the bright colors of the tulips and the scent of the roses, but they didn't even glance at the apple branch. It stood there, silent and still, unnoticed and unremarkable, and for a moment the branch felt a pang of sadness. It had once been admired, but now it was just another part of the landscape, just another flower in the garden. And yet, as the people moved on, the apple branch felt something stir within it. It was not sadness that filled it, but a sense of acceptance, of understanding. It realized that its worth was not tied to the admiration of others, nor to the praise it received. It was not defined by how many people stopped to admire it, or how often it was noticed. Its worth came from the simple fact that it was alive, that it was part of the world, that it was contributing to the life of the garden in its own quiet way. The apple branch had learned that beauty, true beauty, was not about standing out, about being the most admired or the most loved. It was about being part of something greater than itself, something larger, something eternal. The apple branch had once thought that beauty was about being seen, about being recognized, but now it understood that beauty was about the act of living, about being present in the world, about contributing to the world in whatever way it could. As the sun began to set, casting a soft glow over the garden, the apple branch stood tall in the quiet evening air. The garden around it was alive with the sounds of crickets and the rustling of leaves, the gentle hum of the world in motion. The apple branch felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that it was part of this cycle, this rhythm, this dance of life. It had found its place in the world not because it was the most beautiful or the most admired, but because it was alive, because it was part of something greater. And so, the apple branch stood in silence, its leaves swaying gently in the wind, content in the knowledge that it had found its purpose. It was not the center of attention, but it was part of the world, part of the garden, and that was enough. The beauty it had once sought was already there, in the quiet, simple act of being. The seasons continued to shift, as they always do, bringing with them a subtle transformation in the world around the apple branch. Time, like the flow of a river, moved quietly, unrelenting, yet full of grace. The apple branch, once a symbol of beauty, had become just another part of the garden, no longer the center of attention, but instead simply existing, thriving in its quiet place in the grand cycle of life. The noble woman had long since moved on to other decorations, other curiosities, and the apple branch had, in a way, faded from her memory. But in the garden it was alive, its roots deeply grounded in the soil, its leaves rustling gently in the breeze. Yet even as it stood there surrounded by the vibrant life of the garden, the apple branch found itself thinking back to its days in the vase, when it had been admired and praised by the visitors who came to see it. It remembered the softness of the noble woman's hands as they cradled it, the admiration in her eyes as she marveled at its beauty. It remembered the days when it had felt special, when it had been the center of attention, when it had been seen for what it was. But now it was just another part of the garden, another flower among many, no longer the most beautiful or the most admired. And yet, despite this, the apple branch had begun to understand something that it had not known before. Beauty was not about being seen or admired by others. It was not about being the most special, the most perfect, or the most loved. Beauty was something that lived in the quiet moments, in the growth, in the connection to the earth and the life around it. Beauty was in the simple act of being, of living, of breathing, of contributing to the world in whatever way one could. The apple branch had learned that beauty was not a prize to be won, nor a recognition to be earned. It was a quiet presence, a gentle existence, a part of the larger whole. It had once been taken from its place in the world, placed in a vase to be admired. But now it had returned to the earth, where it could grow and thrive in the natural order of things. It had come to understand that its beauty was not in the admiration it received, but in the way it contributed to the world, the way it lived in harmony with the life around it. As the days passed, the apple branch continued to grow, its blossoms turning into fruit, the tiny apples ripening with each passing day. It was no longer just a branch, no longer just a symbol of beauty. It was part of the cycle of life, part of the earth, part of the larger story of the garden, and in that, it found its true purpose. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, the apple branch stood tall, its leaves glowing in the soft light. A young boy came running through the garden, his face bright with joy. He stopped when he saw the apple branch, and for a moment he just stood there, looking at it. His eyes widened in wonder, and he reached out, gently touching one of the apples that hung from the branch. He smiled, his face lighting up with the pure joy of discovery. The apple branch for the first time realized that this was what it had been waiting for. Not the praise of the noblewoman, not the admiration of others, but the simple recognition of its place in the world. The boy saw it for what it was, not just a beautiful object, not just something to be admired, but a part of the world, a living thing that was there to be appreciated for its role in the greater story of life. The apple branch felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that it was being seen, not as an ornament, but as a part of the earth, a part of the life that surrounded it. The boy picked an apple from the branch and held it up to his mouth, savoring the sweetness of the fruit. He didn't care that it wasn't the most beautiful apple, the most perfect one. He didn't care that it had once been admired by others. He only cared that it was part of the world, part of the garden, part of the life that he loved. And in that simple moment, the apple branch understood something profound. It didn't need to be admired by others to know its worth. It was enough to be part of the world, to be part of the cycle of life, to contribute to the joy and beauty of the world around it. As the boy ran off, the apple branch stood still, its leaves swaying gently in the breeze. It had found its place in the world, not as the most admired, but as a part of the greater whole, a living, breathing part of the earth, and in that it found its peace, its purpose, and its true beauty. As the season shifted once more, the apple branch, now strong and steady in its place, had come to understand the deeper truths of its existence. It was no longer concerned with its place in the grand hierarchy of beauty or admiration. It had learned that the true value of life lay not in being seen or praised, but in living authentically, in contributing to the greater whole, in being present and part of the continuous, unbroken cycle of life. It no longer sought approval or recognition, because it understood that its purpose was not to be admired from a distance, but to be part of the ongoing dance of existence. The garden around it had transformed over the months, the flowers blooming and fading, the trees growing tall and strong, each plant adding its own unique beauty to the tapestry of life. The apple branch, with its sturdy trunk and gracefully arching limbs, was no longer the centerpiece of admiration, but it no longer needed to be. It had found its place, its role within the greater story of the garden. The flowers that once seemed so humble, so unimportant, had become as significant as any grand bloom. The dandelions, once considered weeds, now stood proudly among the grasses, their yellow heads nodding gently in the breeze, their seeds ready to scatter and give life to the next generation. And the apple branch, with its ripening fruit, was part of that cycle, part of the endless flow of life that nourished and sustained the world. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a soft shade of pink, the preacher walked through the garden once again, his heart at peace. He had spent many months reflecting on his life, on the lessons he had learned, on the wisdom that had come with age and experience. And as he walked, he looked around him, seeing the garden in a new light. It was no longer just a collection of plants and flowers. It was a living, breathing testament to the cycle of life, to the beauty of growth and decay, to the endless possibility that existed in every moment. The preacher stopped near the apple tree, his gaze falling on the apple branch. He could see how it had grown, how it had become part of the greater whole, how it had found its place in the world, and in that moment he understood. The apple branch, like all living things, had a purpose, a role to play. It was not meant to be admired from a distance, but to be lived with, to be part of the world, to contribute to the beauty of life in its own way. He thought back to the time when he had seen beauty only in the things that were admired, that were held up as examples of perfection, but now he saw the beauty in the simple, the humble, the quiet moments of life. The apple branch, in its own quiet way, had taught him something important, that beauty was not something to be sought, not something to be earned. It was something to be found in the world, in the small, unnoticed moments, in the simple, everyday acts of life. The branch had once been proud, seeking recognition and praise, but now it stood with a sense of quiet contentment, knowing that it had found its place in the world. It had been part of something greater, something larger than itself, and in that it had discovered a deeper beauty than any admiration could provide. The preacher smiled softly as he gazed at the apple branch. It was a simple thing, but in its simplicity, it held a wisdom that many would overlook. It had come to understand the most important lesson of all, that true beauty was not in being seen or praised, but in being part of the world, in being connected to the earth and the life around it. The apple branch had found its peace, its purpose, and in that, it had found its beauty. As the preacher turned to leave, the sun finally set, casting a gentle golden light across the garden. The shadows lengthened, the air cooled, and the world seemed to exhale in quiet contentment. The apple branch stood tall, its leaves rustling gently in the breeze, its branches heavy with fruit. It had found its place in the world, and in that, it had found its true beauty. As the last light of day began to fade and the sky deepened into twilight, the garden seemed to exhale, as if the world itself was sighing in contentment. The apple branch stood still, its leaves fluttering gently in the evening breeze. It had come full circle, finding peace not in the admiration it had once craved, but in the simple act of being, in the quiet beauty of life unfolding as it was meant to. The preacher, who had spent so many years seeking answers, who had once believed that beauty and truth could only be found in the external recognition of others, now understood something profound. He had seen the apple branch, the dandelions, the wildflowers, and the trees not as objects of admiration, but as living beings, each with its own purpose, each contributing to the cycle of life in its own way. There was no hierarchy of beauty, no separation between the grand and the humble. All were part of the same grand tapestry, each thread vital, each one significant. As he stood there looking out over the garden, he could feel the stillness in the air, the deep connection between all living things. The sun had set, but the warmth lingered in the earth, in the trees, in the plants, in everything that lived. The preacher felt that same warmth in his own heart, a warmth that had nothing to do with fame or recognition, nothing to do with admiration from others. It was the warmth of life itself, the warmth that came from being fully present, fully alive, and fully connected to the world around him. He had spent so much time searching for answers in books, in sermons, in the opinions of others, but now he understood that the answers had always been here, in the world, in the simple, humble acts of living. The dandelions in the field, the birds in the trees, the apple branch standing tall in the garden, all of them had something to teach him. They had taught him that beauty, in its truest form, was not something to be sought or earned. It was something that existed naturally, quietly, without need for recognition or applause. It was something that flowed through all life, regardless of its form, regardless of how it was seen or perceived by others. As the preacher walked away from the garden, his heart full of peace, he felt a deep gratitude for the lessons he had learned. He had learned that beauty and truth were not in the applause of others, not in the accolades or the fame, but in the quiet moments, in the connection to the world around him. He had learned that every life, every plant, every creature was a part of the same beautiful cycle, a cycle that was not measured by admiration or recognition, but by the simple act of living, of being, of contributing to the greater whole. And so, as the moon rose high in the sky and the stars began to twinkle, the preacher found his peace. The apple branch, the wildflowers, the dandelions, all were part of the same grand story. A story of life, of growth, of love, and of beauty. And in that story, he had found his place, his purpose, and his own unique beauty. The world was not a place of competition, of comparison, or of judgment. It was a place of connection, of shared existence, where each life, no matter how small or humble, contributed to the greater whole. The preacher had learned that in the end, it wasn't about being the most admired, the most perfect, or the most recognized. It was about living, about growing, about loving the world around you and being a part of it. And in that understanding, he found his own peace, a peace that came not from others but from the simple, profound truth that he was, just like the apple branch, just like the dandelions, part of something much greater than himself. And so, the preacher walked home, his heart full, knowing that he had found the greatest truth of all, that beauty, love, and peace were not things to be earned or sought, but things to be lived, experienced, and shared.